one of the things to keep in mind when creating rigid body rigs is the workflow needed to manage it for moving between scenes or duplicating it and reusing it within the same scene. So basically scene management type activities with rigid bodies. And though you're kind of building this rig that's very similar to an IK rig or a character setup, it does need to be treated differently because it's actually a simulation type effect. All the rigid body objects store their positional and rotational info in global space, not local space. So building a traditional hierarchy with multiple levels doesn't really work for rigid body. Instead, you're much better off with a flat list of objects at the scene root and working with things that way. So in this example, we've got our simple walking robot set up, which we've built at the scene root. And now what we want to do is obviously condense that into something a little more manageable. So what I'm going to do is just create a null and just select all the objects that are members of that rig. So I'll just deselect the gravity and the floor here. And what we want to do is just drag and drop all those elements as a flat list under the null. So my entire hierarchy now sits under the null as a flat list. So we're not creating any kind of hierarchy and problems with animation resulting from parenting and childing. Instead, everything is as a flat list there. So what that means is for the UI, it makes things a lot cleaner. We can just simply rename this to our robot. And if we want to duplicate and reuse this setup, it's also quite easy. What we can do is just like normal with hierarchies, we can just select and branch and do Control D to duplicate it. Now, if we try and translate that in branch, you can see only the parent null is moving. And again, that's because all the children, their positional and rotational info is stored in global space, so they're not respecting this parent-child relationship. So what we want to do is actually just select all the children. We can just go to our selection, go select child node, and that'll select all the elements within the hierarchy. And instead we translate it that way, and that works fine. And now we simply set the initial state for it to define its new initial position, and we're good to go. So there you can see it's working as expected, and we've offset it from the original position. So that's just a little overview of how to manage your rigid body rigs.